Hi, thank you, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anna Chamberlain, the Communications and Marketing Supervisor here at the Reef Foundation. And with us today is Mary Anne Ehlert, who is a financial professional. She is president and founder of the Protected Tomorrows and also Ehlert Financial Group. Thank you for joining us, Mary Anne.
Well, welcome to you too. I'm glad to be here. So today we're going to have a full hour of education, and we're going to be talking about a complex topic that many people seem to get confused with other benefits, and so I look forward to going through those. Now, I just wanted to share a moment of why I do this. It's always my passion, and my passion comes from my sister, so it helps me think and actually make it very personal. I had a sister with cerebral palsy, and she was physically and emotionally and developmentally delayed. So I learned over time that the planning my parents had done over her lifetime required very specific assistance in regard to medical needs and all the doctors that she dealt with in her lifetime and how those bills would be taken care of. And it also helped me understand the importance of all the planning that needs to get done relative to keeping those benefits. So let's talk about some of the important things that we're going to be addressing. But Protected Tomorrows is a group that basically has a purpose to make sure that a person who has a disability, their life is full. They are able to do what they need to do, and it's safe because their financial needs are met and their medical needs are met as well. So that's one of the focuses we're going to have as we talk through it. And my one main goal as we go through all the detail, and there's going to be a lot of details we talk about, is to help you have an awareness. I attend lots of webinars, and I'm sure you do too, to get educated. And sometimes when we get done with the webinar, we find out that we go back to the same old life, and we find that takes over. And so I'm hoping that we can go through this process. And as you're taking some notes and writing your questions that you might want to ask, circle the things that become really important to you so that when we get off the call and you're going on with your life, you find something that you're going to do to make your life better and help you if Medicaid and SSI are benefits that are necessary for your life. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to think about as we get into the benefit process, which I find is very important, is to identify reality. And every day we have a new reality sometimes in our lives, but we want to be really candid through this process of what you can and cannot do as we get into the benefits and we talk about what the future holds and what will the future hold today versus 2 years from now versus 5 years. And that helps us have a concept of how these benefits might take place and become important in our lives. All right, so we're going to talk about today SSI and Medicaid. And these are benefits as we go through them that are very, very important. And then we will talk the next session, we're going to be talking about Medicare and SSDI, which are very different benefits. But I'm going to give you some context today about all of them and how they look together, and then we're going to get very detailed into specifically Medicaid and SSI. So we're going to start giving you the big picture of benefits and how they work. And this is a really important concept to grasp because when you are confused, when you're doing an application and they come back to you and say, well, you're not approved for something, and you think you applied for SSI and they give you a turn down right away, you'll understand what's happening because that's what gets very confusing. The minute you submit an application, you get this turn down. Why did that happen? When in fact, they haven't even really started processing your application yet. So our government gives us two kinds of benefits. Some of them are called entitlements, and those are programs that we get because we bought them. We paid money to the government so that at the time that we need these benefits, we're eligible to get them. And we'll talk about those. And then there's other benefits that are needs-based, and those are the ones we're going to be talking about today. We need them and they're totally focused on our need and not on the fact that we purchased them. Okay? We didn't give the government any money, we didn't pay for these, but we need them. And each of those benefits have two kinds of components to them. It doesn't matter if they're an entitlement or a needs-based program. They're going to be either cash or healthcare and residential. So let's go through those really quickly one more time. So it's an important concept to get. When I'm talking about things on the top, they're going to be things in entitlement. And those are things that we're going to talk about in another session, but I want to make sure you have a concept of what an entitlement is. And those are things that when we get a paycheck, we pay into FICA. And FICA is basically the check, the money that they take to help pay for disability and retirement. So when we see something called FICA, that's Social Security, basically. And then again, the needs-based programs are the ones we haven't paid into, so most of it doesn't come out of anything we ever paid for. Again, when we talk about something on the left side, it's going to be cash, money that we actually get. And we talk about the right side, it's going to be things that pay for our health care and residential supports. A couple of terms I want you to understand that we're going to be talking about as we go through. A very important term is substantial gainful activity, or often referred to as SGA. And substantial gainful activity is a term that the government uses to identify the amount that they're going to set for how much earnings a person can have. And I know when you have a disability, you're not working. That's why you're going for the benefit. But they're looking to say, and sometimes people can work a little bit and they can't make their full salary. So they're looking for what is the amount that they consider substantial gainful activity. And the number right now is $1,220 a month. So that's the rule that they use in the government to determine and classify a disability. So that's an important number to be relative to this conversation. So if you might want to note that down, the substantial gainful activity currently is $1,220 a month, okay? And that is a number that the government uses for all the disability applications that we apply to. Now, asset limitations, so when we talk about income limitations, that's the SGA. That's the amount that we make or don't make that the government is looking at. The other rule that they put in place that's important is asset limitations. That means what are the things you're allowed to own and get this benefit? And we're going to talk about those. So two things, income limitations, which is SGA, and asset limitations, which are the things that we own, and what limits do they place on those in order to get some benefits. Two key terms. Now we're going to get into the details, and we're not going to get to, I'm going to give you some brief overview of the top entitlements, because these are the things that if you qualify for these, you need to listen to the next presentation we're going to be doing on another date, okay? So entitlements, again, are Social Security disability or Social Security. Those are things that we get because we bought them. We gave the government some money, and we're hoping that at the time we're supposed to get these benefits, they will give them to us. And there's an income rule that applies to SGA on these. So you need to have your own Social Security record to know if you're entitled, okay? And this presentation is going to focus on the bottom two quadrants, but if you have any credits that you've paid into, there's a certain number of credits you have to have that you have paid into Social Security to get this. And we'll go through that in detail, but I want to have you have some context because this is what the government looks at first when you apply for disability. So that only rule that applies to these two benefits, Social Security disability or Social Security itself, all have to do with how much you have paid in. And if you haven't paid in, you will not get this benefit. So let's talk about, and I'm going to go through one more point here, is the other benefit that comes with this and the SSDI and SSA is Medicare. So there is a Medicare benefit as well that goes along with this program. So let's talk about substantial gainful activity, because this is a good time to talk about it. Since it's an income limitation and it applies to all benefits that we try to get. How do we prove that we can't make a certain dollar amount? And how does the government look at that? Well, first they're going to look at your medical history. They're determining if are you really disabled, and that's their definition. So they need a couple of things. They're going to want medical history and your records, and they're going to want employment records, and they're going to want to know what you made, and they're going to want to know how much did you, were you able to make when you worked. And so we have to be able to prove those two things, right? We have to prove that we can't make it. Now, what does can't make the money mean? Well, first they're going to look at your doctor's records, and they're going to look at history. So in most cases, when we're talking about paralysis, we have a medical history. We have all kinds of doctors that will write up reports. We're going to have to tell Social Security who our doctors are. We're going to give them our hospital records. We're going to give them that information so that they can go back to those hospitals and they can go back to the doctors and request your records. So you want to know, what does your medical history say? It's a good thing to know. Sometimes doctor writes things in medical records that you don't know are there. So we want to make sure we understand what's in those records, and we want to make sure that we have accurate information. We want to make sure that we can describe all the information we need to get them. If there's social workers we have worked with, if there's any kind of other service that we've worked with that can clearly help present our case, we want to have that. Sometimes we have people that haven't had current medical history. They are finally saying, okay, I'm going to apply now for my benefits, but they don't have current medical records, so we always want to make sure that you keep up your appointments with your doctors, and you keep a good working communication with your doctors. And if you're going to apply for disability, make sure that your doctors know that, because they are used to filling out this paperwork. They're used to sending in records, and they're going to be the ones say it's not about the $12.20 a month is not about you can't work because there's no job. It's really about, is your disability stopping you from doing work? So it's not about, when they say that, it's about any work, okay? If something were to happen to me, and I'm running my company, running Protected Tomorrows, and doing things like this, if something happened where I could still speak and do these presentations, but I couldn't do other jobs, Social Security doesn't care. Social Security cares that I cannot work. So if I can do any job, even if I couldn't do this, but I could at least be the receptionist, and I can make $12.20 a month, they're looking at that. They're not looking at, can I not do my job, but I could do a job and make $12.20. If I have my own disability that I bought, not with the government, but when I was working, I had bought disability, it's really important that I maintain that disability history and I maintain my employment, my insurance, because there's lots of disability coverage. There's disability coverage we have with our employer. There could be disability coverage that we bought from the government, and there could be disability coverage I bought privately. If I have disability coverage privately, I was working and then I became disabled, my private disability coverage will look probably if I can't do my job. They won't care about any other job. They will say, if I couldn't do a job like I had before. But the government doesn't look at it like that. They just look at, could you do any job and make $12.20 a month? And I'm telling you this because it is so important that we communicate to our doctors what we're doing, and that our medical history and records back up our disability. So that's a key point, is having good records and good relationship with your doctor so they understand the process we're going through. So numbers change, okay? And so we're going to look here. These are the Social Security numbers, and this is where you'll see for how the substantial gainful activity number goes up. and I wanted you to understand that. In 2018, the substantial gainful activity for a non-blind person, so if you have a paralysis, you would fall into that category probably. 2018, it's 1180, and 2019, it's 1,220 a month. So you'll see that that goes up, what they consider the amount that someone could make and still be qualified for this benefit. You'll also see later, when we will come back to this at a later point when we talk about SSI specifically, but I want you to first understand what Social Security looks at as a threshold for retirement income. And the other thing that goes with that, as I mentioned, is with SSDI comes Medicare. Now, we're not going to be applying for that because we don't have work record. We're going to assume today for this webinar that we are not talking about someone who has an employment record. We're going to be applying for someone who doesn't have that entitlement benefit. So let's get into SSI itself. Different rules, okay? SSI has two rules, an income and an asset. So remember we talked about SGA and we talked about asset limitations. Both of those are going to apply to SSI. The asset limitation did not apply to SSDI. Now, when you apply for SSI, supplemental security income, different rules. So we're going to go through those rules in detail. But the warning here is that the minute you do an application for SSI, you're not really just applying for SSI. You're telling them you have a disability, and you're trying to get your government benefits. So when you apply for SSI, the first thing they do is they check your entitlement record to see if you're eligible for SSDI. So people sometimes hear me speak and then they call and say, well, I applied for SSI and I got turned down right away. What they're turning you down for the very first pass is SSDI on the top, which is why I wanted to spend a little time on that before we get started. So the SSDI on the top is what they're turning you down initially. Don't be afraid that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get it. Okay? So that's a really important piece to understand. So what are these asset limitations that they tell us about? Well, the first thing is a car, home and a car. Very basic things that we need to have. Can we have a home and get SSI? Can we own a home? Yes. No. Sometimes, if you don't have a home yet and you're thinking about buying a home or taking some of the money that you have and putting it into that category of a home, I always say you might think about, where you're going to own the home, and if you're planning for someone else, how you would own that home. But you're allowed to have a house, okay, as long as you live in it. A car only if you can drive. So if you have a car, you have a van, accessible vehicle that you can drive with, the car made accessible for you, you can have a car. A prepaid funeral. So that is one asset that they allow us to have. And so if we're positioning ourselves to get this benefit, and we have some extra money that they're going to say you're not qualified to get your SSI because of that, we can sometimes take money from those accounts and prepay the funeral for ourselves in order to qualify. And then $2,000. That's it. $2,000 is what we're allowed to have, and an ABLE account and a special needs trust. Those are the things that we can have. Now, everybody understands what home and car and prepaid funeral is. Let's talk about what's in that $2,000 and how you talk about and understand that. So the first thing they're looking at is what's in your name. You're the one applying for SSI, or perhaps someone on the webinar is applying on behalf of a family member. So what are they going to count in the $2,000? Let's talk about that. They're going to look at everything that you have that has your name and your Social Security number on it. So your checking account, your savings account, your savings bonds in the drawer in the, in your office or your bedroom or the kitchen, wherever you keep all those kind of things in a file drawer. They're going to talk about, they ask it's amazing the kind of things. They're going to ask you, do you have any oil rigs and mineral rights? But they're also going to ask about life insurance, and they're going to ask about investments and UTMA accounts and guardianship accounts, and do you have any trusts? They're going to ask everything. They're going to ask if you have an IRA. Do you have a 401k? They're going to ask about all those assets. Every single one of those assets is going to count towards the $2,000. So we're here with account, perhaps that you have a checking account with 1,000, and you have some savings bonds in the drawer that have a value, a total value of $1,500. Well, we're above the $2,000. They look at everything. So let's talk about what you can do with some of those things. If it's a savings bond, so checking and savings is pretty clear. It's when we get into all the other assets that they sometimes we're not clear about. So if it's so let's talk about savings bonds. Savings bonds have two names on them usually. Sometimes it's me and someone else. If it's just me and my name and my Social Security number, it's mine. If it's me and my name and my spouse's or a child's or someone else's name and Social Security number, then it might be able to be cashed out in the other person's name. So researching that is a key thing. Life insurance. So most people don't realize that life insurance sometimes has value. So there's different kinds of life insurance. There's term insurance. Term insurance is like renting something. If you rent an apartment, you don't own it. Well, term insurance is like that. It's only going to pay if you die. It doesn't have any value, so we don't have to count those. But if it's whole life insurance or variable life insurance or universal life insurance, it probably has a value. So what is the value that they're looking at? Well, the value they're looking at is the amount that it would be worth if you cashed it out. So it's usually the cash value of the policy. And sometimes they won't even consider the surrender value, meaning there's a penalty if you cash it out. We have to be able to have that discussion with Social Security. But that amount that's in that account, so let's say you have a $10,000 policy with a $1,500 cash value. The policy, the number they're looking at is the cash value, the $1,500, not the death benefit. Now, how do you know if you own that policy? Well, there's three people on a life insurance policy. The first is the insured, which is you probably. The second is the beneficiary, the person who's going to get it when we pass away. And then the third is the owner, and that's what they care about, who owns the policy. So if you bought it and you're over 18 and you own it, it's yours. If a parent bought it for you, they probably owned it, but once you've turned over 18, once you've reached past 18, it probably belongs to you no matter who bought it. So it's important to find out who is the owner on the policy. So they're looking at everything you've got. So again, home, car, prepaid funeral, and 2,000. Well, what if you have just a little bit too much? So there's some other vehicles we can use, and one of them is an ABLE account. And we're going to have a session just about ABLE accounts, which will be fun. ABLE account is a new investment vehicle that the states, the federal government set them up, and it's a federal law, but each state had to pass their own law to have them. So it's a state-run account. You can't go to a bank or an investment firm to open them. They're by state. And so investigating the state that you live in, if they have one, is important. But if a state doesn't have one, you can go to another state that does have one and open an account called an ABLE account. And there's very specific rules on the ABLE. But let's say you had $5,000 too much and you weren't going to be eligible for SSI. You would be able to take the $5,000 too much and put it in an ABLE account. And then it becomes an eligible asset. You can have it. Okay, so when you're just in that range of $15,000, the most we can put into an ABLE account in any 1 year is $15,000. So if you're going for an application, you find that there's just a little bit too much, you can move it into one of these accounts. There's lots of pros and cons to ABLE accounts. Basically, those accounts allow you to put so much a year away, and other people could also fund money. So if somebody was going to help you out, they could gift to that account, and it wouldn't count against you. There's also a certain amount that if you're employed in that year, and it's the earnings that you made before you were disabled, and you had too much money for that year, you would be able to take some of your earnings up to $12,060 and also put it into the ABLE account that year. You cannot go over those numbers going into the account per year, but it's a safe haven for some dollars, and those accounts, those ABLE accounts, can be used for things over and above what the government's going to pay for you. Okay? So ABLE, remember, ABLE account is a very specific vehicle that we can use to put money when we have too much. And the person with a disability actually owns that account. So it's similar to an account like a college savings account. It actually was created out of the same in legislation. It just got modified, the 529. It's called a 529A for ABLE. And it came out of the legislation that was existing already for college savings, and it created this ABLE account. I will warn you, the ABLE account has some positives. The positives are that it's tax-free. A lot of the states have really great vehicles that are used within that ABLE account. So it's a checking account and a savings account and a debit card, and it's just like a bank checking account. And it also has some investment opportunities inside of it. So it's a great way to save dollars if you're going to have SSI, but there's only so much you can put away every month. The downside of these, especially having to do with SSI, and we'll touch on this at the end again, the downside of the ABLE accounts is that once you have over $100,000 in your ABLE account, your SSI may be suspended. So we will touch back on the back end as we get through this, so you'll understand that. There's also a payback on the end if you pass away that the government can come back for some reimbursement on your ABLE account. Not for SSI money, but for Medicaid that might have been spent on your behalf. The other asset that you can have is a special needs trust. So a special needs trust is a very defined vehicle where you're allowed to have others save for you, or you could take some of your money and put it into a special needs trust. There's two kinds, where you can put some of these assets that are too much away into the account. Okay? So other people can save. Let's say you're the one with a disability and your parents want to leave you an inheritance. This is a vehicle that can be used to receive an inheritance from others. And it's also, there's two forms of special needs trust, and we will go to those in a little bit. But these are the assets that you can have, all right? So again, we'll go through how much is this SSI, and what are the rules having to do with it? So again, we talked about the $12.20 a month that we have to prove with medical records. We have to prove that we can't make that much because of our disability. So we first prove that, and then after that, the amount we'll get, and we prove we don't have any money. So two proofs we have to do. We have to prove that we can't make the $12.20 a month, and we have to prove that we don't have more than a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000, an ABLE account, and a special needs trust. If we have more than that, or anything else in our name over and above that, we will not get the $771 a month. Okay? And that's basically, there's some other numbers on here, but I wanted to give those to you here. So let's talk a little bit more about SSI for a while. So I apply for SSI. They come back and they tell me, we're declining you, but the first decline is always again for that SSDI. So the next thing we're going to do is you could either go to the Social Security office, or you can do this by online and phone to do the application. And you don't have to go to a Social Security office to do your application. You can do it yourself. You can appoint someone else to do it. You can hire firms to do it for you. But they're going to want, again, your medical proof. So the first thing they're going to do is say, do you have an entitlement record? They'll tick off, nope. Then they're going to say, okay, can we prove this person has a disability? They're going to get your medical records, and they're going to look at those things, and they're going to determine if you have a disability. Now, in most cases, I'm sure you have medical records. I'm sure they're looking at it going, yes, this person is. If they are not sure that you have a disability that will stop you from working, They will then have you go to their doctor. Okay? And they will assign a doctor that you are going to go see, and that doctor will see you, and they'll make the evaluation. So let's say we go through that SSI, and they've decided, yes, this person has a disability. Then they go into your assets, and they will look at everything that you told them that you have, and they will make the determination. Okay. So we have now proven that you have a disability. Next, we're going to prove that you have no assets. I'm going to take a 1-second break. Just get I have a sore throat, so I'm going to just take a glass of water. Just a second. Okay, I'm back to normal. So we now are we're going to prove to them we have a limitation on the assets. Okay, we're going to prove all that. And let's say we do a really good job. They may come back with some questions about our assets. But most of the time, if you do a good job of documenting everything, they may ask for copies if you have an ABLE account. They may ask you for proof. Don't be afraid if they ask you for things. As long as you know what you have and you're proving it, you know those are things you can have. So next thing they're going to ask is a few other questions that you're wondering why they're asking those questions. So they'll ask questions like, they'll say they've said, okay, assets are good and disability is good. And they're going to say, where do you live? And maybe you're living alone. Maybe you're living with someone else. Maybe you're living, who knows where you're living. But they ask you where you live. If you say you're living with someone, if you live alone, that's the answer, right? They know you have expenses and you're supporting yourself with whatever money you have. But in many cases, we're living with someone who's helping us out. And so they're going to ask the questions about where do you live? And if you answer that you're living with someone, they will ask you what you're paying to live there. Because if you just say, I'm living with my parents, or I'm living with my sister, or I'm living with my spouse, whatever the answer is, they'll ask you how you're contributing to that expense. And they may just, if they don't ask you the question and you don't explain it to them, they're going to make the assumption that you are getting subsidized by someone. So this is an important piece to understand. So if I'm living with my sister and I'm living there free, she is giving me income. And if she's giving me income in kind because she's letting me live there for free, she is therefore providing you support. And that support is going to reduce your benefit. Okay? So important point is that we clearly describe our living situation. So if they ask me, where are you living? And I say, I'm living with my sister. And I would say, and I live in a separate household in her home, and I pay my fair share of the expenses. Or I'm paying her room and board. And all of those are components of your situation. But I describe that I'm paying, and they'll say, well, how much are you paying? And I'll say, well, I'm giving her, because remember, we have limited income because we're not working, and we have limited assets. So how am I paying that? So I said, well, the plan is that I'm going to give her $350 a month when I get my benefits. So I'm paying $350 a month, okay? And for the next couple of months, I had $1,500 in my checking account, so I'm using that. So I have to present my case that I am providing that. And they may ask further questions about, okay, so how much are her expenses? And what's her mortgage and what's her real estate tax, and they're trying to find something out. How many people in the house? If I say I'm paying my fair share, and I use that scenario of my fair share, the risk is that they will ask all of her expenses, and they will say, okay, 2 people in the household, divided by half, that's your fair share. I don't have any money. How can that be my fair share? She must be helping me. So I tend to answer, I'm living in my sister's home and I'm paying a fair amount of rent. And they will say, well, where'd you get that? Well, we went on Craigslist and looked what a room in her house is worth, and it's $350 a month, and that's what I'm paying her. So I'm paying her a room and board fee for the $350 a month. Clear? As long as I'm doing that, they won't reduce the full amount of my SSI because I'm going to use it for my basic support. If I'm living with someone and they are paying part of my, I'm getting free service from them, they are going to reduce it because I'm getting in-kind income. So those are important things. So first, they take your disability information. You prove the disability. Then they get your money situation, and you get the money, okay, and they understand all of that. And then they ask the questions about where you're living to make sure that you're not getting supported by someone, and we explain that. 3 steps here, basically, that we need to prove, because this is needs-based, okay? This is not entitlement-based. We have to be able to prove our situation. Once we do all of that, and we get approved, we would get $771 a month. If you're not getting that amount, there's a couple of things that might have occurred. One thing that might have occurred is that you have some income, okay? You don't make $1,220 a month, but let's say you make $200 a month. What they do in SSI is if you are making something, you're allowed to make $85 free. That's your free number. Anything over $85 a month you make, they are going to take half of that away from your SSI check. So if I was still able to do some work, and I told them I can make $200 a month, they were going to say 85 is free, and 115 is too much. So then they're going to take half of that out of my SSI check, and they're going to give me less. That's rule number 1, is understanding when you get the amount what they're doing with that. The other reason that you might not get the full amount is you told them you're living somewhere, but you start getting your SSI check. So let's say everything went perfectly, and you are getting $771. What do I then have to do with that money? Well, it's going to go into a separate checking account. They're going to ask you to set up an account specifically for your SSI. And you are going to have to do some reporting on how you're spending this money. So I would set up a separate account, if possible, as my account where my SSI is going, and they will direct deposit it. If you're having someone help you and they're going to be your payee to help pay bills, they will also be on the account as your representative. Otherwise, it's into your own account. Keep it separate. It makes it a lot easier to track when you are asked questions. Now, if it's going into this money that you get from SSI, let's say you decide to have it go into your checking account, you still can only have $2,000 total. Okay, so you get your SSI, you're supposed to spend it. You're supposed to spend it on your basic support. Okay, it's not for your vacations, it's for your basic support. It's for your room and board. It's for your food. It's for that rent that you had to pay. So it doesn't happen overnight to get these approvals. It takes time. And so when you get your SSI check, there's something that has to happen. You have to be able to say, I told Social Security, and I probably had to fill out a form that says, I have a rental agreement with my sister. And so if I said I'm going to pay my sister $350 a month, I need to pay my sister $350 a month. If I'm going to, otherwise, I'm supposed to use that money to live. Now, most of us won't have a problem spending it. That's what we have. That's how we're going to spend it. So you're going to track how you spend it. I suggest that you keep some kind of a little system where you're showing how you, so if they come back later and say, well, how'd you spend the SSI? You can show, this is how much I spent on my room and board or my rent or whatever. This is how much I spent on my medical bills. This is how much I spent on different things. Okay? Okay. So that's how SSI works. We're going to get the check. It took them time to get me approved, and so I got 3 months worth of $775. or 771 rather. And so I got 3 checks. I'm going to have to say, if I was giving $350 a month to my sister, I've got to take $350 out 3 times to give it to my sister. This account has to be spent. If you start getting your SSI and you think, well, I'm living with someone and I'm actually getting someone who's kind of helping me out a little bit, this account has to be spent down. It has to be below the $2,000. In addition to any other thing you have, that's what you can have. Not the ABLE and not your special needs trust. When we add everything else up, they're going to be able to request my SSI and how I spent it, and they're going to look at my numbers every so often. So what is the other thing that we need is health care, okay? I don't know if we had health insurance, if we don't have health insurance. But if you were working and you had health insurance from work, that probably only lasted a certain period of time. COBRA can last up to 36 months if you have a disability. And so maybe you had your COBRA, and that maybe instigated you to do all this because you now are losing your Medicaid, medical attention. And so Medicaid. Now Medicaid isn't great, but it is good medical coverage, and it covers hospitals. It covers doctors, but not all doctors. The doctor has to accept it. So if you have a specialist, you need to find a specialist that takes the Medicaid, or Medi-Cal if you're in California. And it covers drugs. So what if you are applying and you still have health insurance? Should you do this application? I would say do it as soon as you get your SSI, apply for your SSI. Medicaid, you have to prove to them that you have SSI or you have a disability. If you've already proved you have the disability, same rules for Medicaid. You have to prove you have disability, and you have to prove you have limited assets. So if I've done all that with SSI, Medicaid is pretty simple. I can go to the Medicaid office and say, okay, this is what I got my SSI, and they're going to ask for an original birth certificate to be prepared, that they're going to ask for that, and you give them both of those, and they will then get you a Medicaid card. So if you have no health insurance, Medicaid will step in and become your health insurance. If you have health insurance, Medicaid will be secondary, and your health insurance will go first, and Medicaid will go second. Now, in most cases, your health insurance is probably paying more than Medicaid, but let's say you have some drugs that you're taking, and the copay is a certain dollar amount, and Medicaid will also have its own copay. If the Medicaid copay is less, you'll get the drugs with the lower copay, and they coordinate. Okay? What else does Medicaid do? Well, Medicaid also pays, and this becomes important if we are going to need long-term care support. Medicaid can also pay nursing home assistance and programs like that. So a little different rules, and I'm going to go through those in a minute, but most of the time right now we're talking about health care keys. There's also, Medicaid is like a ticket. I call it a golden ticket because it pays for certain things like the residential, or if there are programs out there that you need to get into that are Medicaid funded, they have a Medicaid waiver, they may come back to you and say, well, prove you have Medicaid in order to get into our program. So Medicaid is an important program from that perspective. So in context, I wanted to give you this is how they work together. There's the SSDI and Medicare that you can't get yet because you haven't been entitled to it. You will become eligible for that if you have a work record or if you have become disabled before the age of 22. We can talk on the next session about how you might get into this program, these entitlement programs, based on someone else in your family. But for now, we just applied for SSI, and so we got our SSI check for 771, we hope, then we have our Medicaid. Now, if you have any kind of work that you do, you're able to do some work, and you are working, you'll be required, if you have SSI, to send in your paycheck information. You'll have to report it. Now, what if you're making some money, but you have expenses that are significant to even do the job? So those are work-related expenses that can also reduce the amount you're making for Social Security purposes. So if you make the $1,220, let's say you could still do some work, and so you're making $800 a month. You want to keep your SSI, and more importantly, you want to keep your Medicaid. But that $800 a month you're making, first of all, they're giving you a limitation. They're saying, okay, you can only make 85, so we're going to cut your SSI back because you're making those dollars. But if you also keep track of, let's say you have extra transportation expenses to get to that job, they will take into account those extra expenses and take that off of your income so that in fact they're taking less away from your SSI. So work-related expenses tied to your disability are important to also track when you're reporting your income. So you report your income and you report your work-related expenses that you have so that they have the net against your income. Okay? All right. I know we go through a lot of stuff on these webinars, so I'm trying to make sure that we do some repetition on a few areas. Okay. There's some questions coming in, but I'm going to save them for the end to make sure I get through this, and we'll have enough time. So the last thing I want you to understand is when we talked about Medicaid for residential, let's say you're married, and so what happens if you're not married, what happens if you need nursing home support at some point? The rules are still the same. You still have that $2,000 limitation. However, if you're married and the spouse is going to stay in the home but you need care, they're still looking at the substantial gainful activity numbers, but there are some other numbers that will apply. They will look and say, if you have a spouse, a house is a protected asset, a house of a certain, unless you have a house over a certain limit. So you see the home equity limits on the bottom, that the most maximum home equity you could have is $878 for the spouse to maintain. The spouse is allowed to keep a certain housing allowance and a maintenance need. So the spouse could keep about $3,100 a month for maintenance needs. Somewhere depends on the state you're in. It's called spousal impoverishment. They will not impoverish the spouse in order to get you help. So if you're in this situation, it's really important to get some legal assistance in order to keep your SSI while your spouse is maintaining the home and keeping income. So as a couple, it gets a little more complicated. But that has to do with nursing home coverage, and I'm not going to get into that in a lot of detail in this one, but it's important to understand. The other thing to know is if you have assets and they're too much, we're going to talk about what could you do with those. So if I had too many assets and I have another family disabled member like a child, there's some exceptions that I'm able to put some assets into a special needs trust for a family member and get benefits myself. So I wanted to put that in your head just to remember that if you have too much but you have a child with a disability perhaps, there is some planning we can do to get mom and dad benefits. Okay, so what do I need you to know? Know that health insurance and this coordinate. That if you are a minor or you're working with if you have a disability yourself and your parents are working, there is a way that if you're on your parents' health insurance, you can perhaps stay on your health insurance past the age of 26. So if you find yourself in this situation, know that there are laws by state that the company your parent works for, if you're on their parent's record, might allow you to stay on your parent's health insurance as long as you have it. Okay? The laws are always changing, so it's up to you to really stay up to speed on what's happening here. So how are you going to plan for this? So mostly we're talking about if you are the one with a disability and someone's going to leave you money. This is the stuff that can undo all the planning that you've done. You've gotten your SSI, and your parents are going to leave you a disability, leave you a check, leave you an inheritance. And they know that you need more, so they're going to leave you more. Well, they can't leave you assets, okay? If they leave you assets, they're going to put you over that $2,000 limit. So if you are planning, or if you are planning for someone else with a disability, you are the mom and dad, or you are a relative and you want to leave them something, you cannot leave it directly to them, okay? Because if you leave them money, don't give it to a sibling to hold it for them. That's fraught with danger, that there is something we can do. So there's something called, the first kind of special needs trust I'll talk about is, because somebody said that there are two types. Yes, I'm going to answer that question. The special needs trust has there's a third-party special needs trust. The third-party special needs trust is a trust I can set up. I can set it up for my son. Let's say my son has a disability, and he had an accident, he has paralysis, and he now needs money, and I'm setting up my estate plan. I can leave my inheritance I'm going to leave for him into a special needs trust. Or let's say I want to give him money every month, I don't want to put it into a trust. I can leave it into the trust. It will not count. Remember I said it was something that didn't count against him. It's not his money. I'm setting it up for him for the future. It's spent over and above whatever the government pays for. It's over and above that. So if he's getting his SSI, his money can be used for things that SSI will not pay for. So I control it. I pay the bills. It never is money that's going to go to him. Okay? He's never going to get it. It's going to be paid directly to providers for his support. So if the SSI is paying for certain things, but he needs more than that, I would pay the providers out of this account. I would put the money into it. I could leave an inheritance into that. And as for his support, over and above what the government pays for. I set up the rules. I created it. I'm the trustee. I name other people in the future to be the trustee. He can never be the trustee. It's spent for his care, and when he passes away, it's going to go to who I say. That's a third-party special needs trust. Okay? So it means, could he ever put his money in it? No. So what's a special needs trust good for? For my will, I'm going to leave him money. So if you're the person with a disability, make sure you talk to your parents about not leaving you an inheritance. The inheritance is going to can be left to you, but not directly to you. Let's say I have some life insurance, or your parent has life insurance, and they want to leave it to you. It can't go to you. It goes into the special needs trust. How do you get a special needs trust? You need an attorney. An attorney will do that. Okay? I want to leave some retirement accounts to my son. I leave it to the special needs trust. Or I can save money for my son. Or your parents can leave money for you, or relative. What if now you, the person with the disability, has money? What are we going to do? Well, there's a third-party special needs trust. This is the other type of special needs trust. Okay? The special needs trust, the other one, was for other people's money. This is for, we call it first-party money. It's called a payback trust. So you're getting ready for the SSI, and you go, I funded the ABLE with the $15,000, but I still have $100,000 too much, and I really want to get this SSI. It's really important, and Medicaid's important. We can then have a payback. Attorney can create a payback trust. You put that money into this payback trust, and you can only do this if you're under 65. If you're over 65, you can't use the payback. Okay? So if you're 30 years old, you have a disability, you have too much money, you're allowed to put it into the payback trust. The payback trust is used for supplemental care during your lifetime. The downside is when you pass away, the money government can reimburse for Medicaid spend. So if I look at this and say, okay, there's two kinds of trusts to review. The one on the left is for other people to save money and put money aside for a person with a disability. The payback trust is for my own money. So I'm the person with a disability. When my parents want to leave me something, the trust on the left is where my parents can set up and leave me something. But if I had too much money and I can't get SSI because of it, I can put money into this. I can put my money into the payback trust, and it can be used. I can then get benefits for my lifetime, and when I pass away, the government will get reimbursed for what I put in. So if my parents set up a third-party trust for me, and I took my money that was too much and put it into the payback trust, if I pass away and there's nothing left in the payback trust, or there's a little bit, they will take it. They cannot go after the trust my parents set up for me. That remaining money will go to wherever my parents wanted it to go in the document. There's one other little nuance here, that if let's say I become disabled and I was married and getting some child support for my child, okay, and that child support is coming to me, it really refers my child. So child support also needs to be handled in a certain way so that it won't hurt my benefits. If I am a parent of a person with special needs and they are getting, my ex-spouse is paying some child support belongs to the person who is the child who's getting subsidized. So there are special uses for the payback trust as well to have child support payable to that account. What if I'm married and I'm getting maintenance? Can the maintenance be put into a payback trust? If it's directly paid into a special needs trust, we can talk to an attorney about that. If it already gets to me, then it would be, so my money goes into the payback, money other people are paying for me goes into a special needs trust. Important nuance. The ABLE, just a quick reference to the ABLE again. The ABLE account is there to allow us to use it. It's the first thing we would use. If I had too much money, the ABLE is the first thing I'm going to do to put some funds into it. Now, there's some questions. I want to make sure, because we're coming up to the end of the hour, that I answer the questions. So one of the questions was, what happens if I move to a different state? Do the SSI benefits carry from state to state? Yes, SSI is federal, okay? Medicaid is state. So if I am qualified for SSI in Illinois and I move to California, I have to notify the government that I'm moving, but the SSI goes with me. Now, Medicaid is different. So if I'm getting SSI from the federal government and I move to another state, I will have to go through to the next state and apply and prove that prove all the rules. So I'm getting SSI again. It's an easy move, but I still do have to go through the process of reapplying in the new state. Okay. Somebody else said PWD stands for what? Because I had that on some of my slides. PWD is person with a disability. I just do that for ease of explanation. Okay, next question. With SSI based on disability, how do you apply for Medicaid? So I've got SSI, it's based on the disability. Medicaid is also based on the disability. Same rule. So when we talked about the income and asset limitations, the same things here apply to the application process. So if you're not going to apply for SSI, but going right to Medicaid, you're still going to have to prove that you have a disability, and you're going to have to prove you have income, limited assets and income. One more question, can you have a special needs trust created inside the person's will? You can, but many times we want to use the, let's say I create a special needs trust for my son who I know has a disability and I want to leave him an inheritance. So can my will create the special needs trust? You could do it that way. It's not a recommendation, and most attorneys will not recommend that because we never know we're going to need it. So what if my son needs to have someone, his sister, let's say, wants to put some money in her will to him? It wouldn't exist until I died. So if I wanted to create a trust for my son, who became disabled at the age of 25, and I wanted to put study money aside for him, I would want to make sure that I created it as a living special needs trust so that other family members could piggyback off on what I had done. Okay. I don't see any more questions, and I know we had a limitation of an hour. I hope that helps understand the rules of SSI and the rules of Medicaid. It is complicated, but if you keep in mind that those income limitations are all about what the doctor says, you need good medical records, and the asset limitations are very clear. House, car, prepaid funeral, $2,000, ABLE, special needs trust. ABLE is by state, special needs trust is created by an attorney. I enjoyed sharing my insights with you. If you have any questions, you have phone numbers on the screen there, or you can send them also to info@protectedtomorrows.com, and we will address any other questions that didn't come up on the seminar. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have in the future. hope to see some of you again at the Medicare and SSDI conference, because that will play into this as well, because people get impacted when parents retire. Sometimes if your disability starts early, it doesn't. You may have your own disability record, which is important to learn about. Thank you again for sharing with us your questions, and if there's anything else we can do, you got our phone number and our email address, and you can also let the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation let them know that you want another session on some topics. But we want to thank them for letting us share with you our knowledge, and hopefully this helped you do your applications. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Mary Anne, for joining us, and thank you for everyone who tuned in today. Once again, this is Anna Chamberlain from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and we hope to see you next month. Have a good one.
You too.